life. There is no physical way that Sarah can have a baby. And in verse 12, Sarah laughs to herself as she thought, after I'm worn out and my master is old, will I now have this pleasure? Notice how Sarah describes herself. I'm old. I'm wore out. I'm worthless. I'm a nothing. I'm a nobody. Sarah's not laughing out of arrogance, but because a life of disappointment has hounded her. And when I read this and thought about it, I thought Sarah's just like Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh. Remember the donkey? Some of you are smiling. Nothing ever good happens to me. Oh, woe is me. Life's awful. And Sarah's got every reason to think about this. Go back to the story. Think about what Sarah's experienced. 25 years ago, her husband Abraham says, I got this vision. God is telling me to leave the land of our family, our ancestors, and go to a place where we don't know where we're going. And they get to the land of Canaan, and the famine comes, and they have to go down to Egypt. And Abraham says, let's tell a lie because you're beautiful and desirable. And if Pharaoh inquires, tell him you're my sister instead of my wife. And this promised child is really slow in showing up. So Sarah comes up with this bright idea. Let's give my maidservant to Abraham as a surrogate mom. And I think Sarah's probably thinking this isn't going to work. But Hagar brings Ishmael into the world, and there's incredible jealousy. And Sarah's been married probably for 70 years to Abraham at this time, just based on the guesses of cultural norms. And her relatives are grandparents and great-grandparents. And she still doesn't have a kid. And as we've looked and talked about, this was a sign that something was wrong with her, and people looked down at her and her infertility. And she's feeling old and wore out and good for nothing. And in her mind, as she laughs, Sarah's hidden issues come out. Because I think Sarah's problem is she believes that God is limited in what she can do in her life. Sarah's put up these boundaries and says, God, you can't do above and beyond what I expect. And I wonder if she thinks that she can be more clever than God based on her lie that she participated in going down to Egypt. I wonder if she's seething with jealousy over Hagar having this child and she can't. Because the problem's not with Abraham. The problem's with her that she can't have a baby. And Sarah's carrying around a lot of disappointment. Some of it might have been fueled by valuing herself not by God's standards as a valuable woman in God's sight, but by the world's standards, and feeling like because she hasn't been able to bear children, somehow she's a second-class person. And if we're honest, we felt this way about God. God, remember you when I was being bullied in high school and nobody stopped it? God, if nothing's too hard for you, how come I lost my job? Couldn't you have kept the economy together a little bit better? Or couldn't somebody else have lost the job? And God, how come my kid got sick and theirs didn't? And we hear this promise and we say, God, maybe stuff's not too hard for you, but I'm not seeing it in my life. Because Sarah says, I don't believe you, God. I don't believe your promise that I'm going to have a kid. It's going to happen. Now, as we know the rest of the story, Sarah indeed does have a child. But sometimes God doesn't work that way. And I think we need to be very, very careful as we think about verse 14. Where God says, is anything too hard for the Lord? And I think we need to let God work in His way and His purposes. A lot of you know that my mom is struggling right now. Mom is in the early stages of dementia. I spent 45 minutes on the phone with her on Tuesday trying to convince her that my dad was her husband and I was her son. Other days she's clear as a bell, other times. I would love for my mom, I would love for mom to have some miracle happen in her life. Never have to worry about this. When Tuesday, the doctor's going to find, when she goes in for a physical, the doctor's going to find something, and some combination of medication or maybe something that's physically wrong with her, and there's going to be this quick fix, and mom's never going to have these spells again. Would that be unrealistic? God could do that. But what I'm trusting God's going to do is He's going to bring extra grace to my dad so he can cope with the slow descent and decline of his wife of 55 years. That my brother and I are going to have wisdom in knowing how to advise our parents. That friends from church and the neighborhood are going to step alongside them and help them during this time. See, I believe that nothing's too hard for God, but sometimes God doesn't exactly work the way we do. And we have a tendency to say, God, I want to write my story. I want to write it the way I think everybody lives happily ever after. And we don't get to do that. But the circumstances of our life are never too hard for God.